Years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression. I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America.
Do we respond to something at face value? Or how much do we bring in the context of reality?
As a symbol of this moment of how much of a sea change the Trump administration was, have the established traditional media packing up, walking out.
Harvard is suing the Trump administration after the White House threatened to freeze more than $2 billion in grants and contracts.
It very quickly became clear that this wasn't about fighting anti-Semitism per se, it was about punishing perceived political enemies.
Why would it make any sense for someone to be against the federal government not giving a bunch of money to a bunch of people who are clearly against the federal government? Why is that not a fair argument?
Earlier this month, the president offered 9 schools priority access to federal funding if they signed a deal called the Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education.
Just like you can't threaten with a stick, you also can't hold out a carrot and say you'll get this privilege, but only if you say what we agree with.
There's no way the administration trying in any way to control what's taught on campuses.
Even if you agree with the government here, even if you think, yeah, you know what, these are liberal enclaves, they do need some shaking up. Be careful. If you give the federal government the power to come in and start saying these are the things you will teach, these are the things you won't teach, you tell me that the truth that we are arguing, debating in college is contingent upon the next election? That's terrifying to me. That's not America, and sure as hell isn't learning.
That agreement forcing schools to not factor diversity, equity, and inclusion policies when hiring staff or admitting students, limiting how many foreign students a university can accept, and would also require campuses to follow a set of gender definitions when it comes to males and females.
If you say that the government is allowed to use its vast financial, regulatory resources to privilege certain viewpoints over others, then we do live in a country that is awash in propaganda and that doesn't have a free and open marketplace of ideas.
It has been most successful when it goes after universities one at a time, when it picks its targets in that way, and it has been less successful when it tries to go after an entire industry.
Brown University,
Dartmouth College,
MIT, University of Virginia,
University of Pennsylvania,
the University of Arizona.
From USC, the university has formally rejected a compact with the Trump administration.
I think that's one of the reasons it failed, because the resistance to it would have been countrywide.
It's just, there's just so much.
Before we had a flag and we had it so it's positioned above the tent so it would be in the camera and they just move.
What was that? Oh my God! He just got shot! Holy shit! Holy shit!
Charlie Kirk, according to the President of the United States, is dead. I don't really know where you go from here.
They're reporting that Charlie has died.
The left is losing the battle of ideas. Violence is a last resort. They're trying to silence us.
Our nation is broken.
Those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
We also, unfortunately, saw the right engage in its own form of cancel culture in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
And I think for the people who are celebrating Charlie Kirk, look, we have a First Amendment in this country. The First Amendment protects a lot of very ugly speech. But if you celebrate Charlie Kirk's death, you should not be protected from being fired for being a disgusting person.
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech.
In the past week, multiple people have been fired from public schools and universities following comments on Kirk's death were found on their social media.
Do you think that Charlie Kirk's assassination brought something out of the Trump administration that previously wasn't there? Or do you think that it just elevated existing kind of ideas?
I think it elevated it, and like any crisis or like any shocking event, it might have made them feel more emboldened to re-up the efforts they had already done.
Protests against ICE in Portland continue tonight with hundreds of people marching to Portland's ICE facility.
Here in Portland, a second day of protests saw federal agents using tear gas, pepper balls outside the ICE facility.
A major surge in federal agents are expected here in Minnesota on top of what we all have already seen in recent weeks. The Trump administration escalating its immigration crackdown.
Well, one of the striking things about the surge in Minnesota seems to be that it may well have all been in reaction to the speech of state leadership. We can't forget that Minnesota's governor was Kamala Harris's running mate. So it's personal with Trump and Minnesota in a way that it's not personal with every other state with a Democratic governor. It was soon after Minnesota leadership had criticized the Trump administration's approach to immigration that Trump said, okay, we're going to surge in your state. And this is kind of a pattern for Trump where he makes the political personal.
Dueling protests tonight in Minneapolis getting heated.
This was a public campaign, not just for immigration enforcement, but an actual deployment of ICE agents to quell protest. I'm going into that worried that this is in some way an attempt to signal to the public, we won't tolerate this dissent.
The government has made a concerted effort to attack the right to record and report on law enforcement operations in public. It's retaliated against people doing this in a variety of ways, including, putting their names in databases.
Because we have a nice little database.
Oh, good.
And now you're considered a domestic terrorist.
We've had reports of people being followed to their homes. Even for people who I think, might say, I believe in immigration enforcement, I think should be troubled by the fact that the administration has tried to shut down media reporting, but also just regular everyday people out in the streets.
Why is it not reasonable for the government to say, hey, we have an interest in protecting the safety and welfare of our employees?
Part of the job of being a government official is facing often vociferous criticism.
Tense clashes between ICE officers and protesters in Minnesota only intensifying this morning.
It's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you.
That shooting killed 37-year-old mother of three, Renee Good.
While all eyes are still very much on Minnesota following the shooting of 37-year-old Alex Preddy by a Border Patrol agent.
The federal government and local agents are offering up some very different views of what happened.
This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
I can believe that her death is a tragedy while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making.
Numerous members of the cabinet, Trump, Noem, Greg Bovino, all started using a deeply alarming vocabulary to describe the people that they were engaged with.
It was an act of domestic terrorism.
An individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement.
And that's what you need to focus on, Jake, is they were breaking the law by impeding and obstructing a law enforcement operation.
These are all rhetorical recasting of protected speech as something that is a law enforcement threat or a criminal act. None of it is correct.
The discrepancy between the narrative that was being pushed from the White House and what we could see with our own eyes. I mean, that brought to mind 1984. The party's final command was to disregard the evidence brought to you by your own eyes.
We should have a system that holds public officials and law enforcement officers accountable for the death of nonviolent protesters. It turns out that we don't.
A tragic shooting like that happens. Why is Donald Trump not blameless? He wasn't even there. Do you feel like he plays a role?
When Trump appoints Noem, when Trump listens to Stephen Miller, when Trump appoints Bovino and Homan and all the rest of them, and they say we are going to have masked federal agents take these actions in our streets, absolutely he bears responsibility. The buck stops with him.
Bovino is departing Minneapolis imminently, as are many other CBP agents, and Bovino at least has been relieved of his command.
After 73 days, mass detentions, and the deaths of 2 American citizens, a surge in immigration enforcement efforts in Minneapolis is now ending.
Trump runs for office under the banner of restoring free speech, signs the EO day one. You've seen 18 months of that promise materialize. From your perspective, did he do it?
What we've seen is essentially using every tool at the Trump administration's disposal to affect the speech marketplace, to suppress dissenting voices.
They almost get a one-bite rule. They can violate your First Amendment rights once and then stop, and then so long as they move on to some other way of violating your rights, it's very hard for courts to catch up.
I think we're at a low point for freedom of speech in the country because the government has been using a variety of tools at its disposal to suppress dissent, to try to impose ideological control.
It freaks me the fuck out. Let me just be clear on the record. It freaks me the fuck out. There are nights I cannot sleep. There are nights when I wonder if the damage done is irreversible, if the pattern is thus set, if we had 250 years of doing it one way and now we're doing it another way, if laws are worth the paper that they're printed on.
I think even where First Amendment rights remain intact on paper, that freedom of speech is actually measured by whether or not people feel free to speak. And I'm not saying our cultural hands were clean a decade ago. There were lots of people who felt chilled or on the verge of being canceled or, felt that woke culture had made them feel that they can't speak. I'm not saying we're innocent historically, but I think we're in a categorically darker and riskier point in time. So honestly, God bless everybody who goes out and lifts their voice in protest, because people in power are not going to save us from autocracy. If we want these individual liberties to stay alive, we got to do it. Once we give the government this power to create fear, to silence us, they're not going to give it back, and somebody's going to be holding that power that you damn well wish was not. Freedom of speech in this moment kind of lives in us. So that's a good thing. It means that there's a chance for those values to survive and thrive and hopefully live another day in a nonpartisan way where they're not a suicide pact, they're our path to liberty. We just have to have the balls to make them stick.